Welcome to the Geek 101 podcast. Road to Arrowverse Crisis, whatever episode this is. This is the podcast series where we go season by season down the line of the CW Arrowverse universe in an attempt to prepare for the ultimate in CW crossovers, Crisis on Infinite Earths. Today, we are going to be covering Supergirl Season 2 and Legends of Tomorrow Season 2. With me, as always, are my friends Tessa and Sam. Say hello, guys.
Hello.
Hello, guys.
I see what you did there, Sam.
Yeah.
I don't approve.
He's so funny.
Yeah.
Let's just go ahead and dive right into two very interesting seasons because these are definitely transitional seasons. But first, let's cover Supergirl Season 2. What did you guys think about Supergirl Season 2, just in general, first of all?
Well, in general, I think it's a fairly good season. It definitely is a transitional season, like you said. The first season, as we mentioned last time we talked about Supergirl, which seems like a while ago, aired on CBS, and it was not picked up for a second season by CBS, but it was picked up by the CW. So this is the season where we get to see Supergirl come home to the CW, where all the other Arrowverse shows are. And there are definitely some things that they sort of had to work out in the first couple of episodes. There's a lot less juggling of place, I think. They sort of streamlined some things a little bit. So instead of having Kara be at Catco and the DEO and the random apartment that they sort of used during season 1 as a base of operations, they just have some characters come over to the DEO and make that sort of the main base of operations for Supergirl. So we get Wynn being hired by the DEO, and we have Cat Grant, unfortunately, leaving the show, or at least leaving it as a regular. So there's some reshuffling that's definitely going on at the beginning of this season.
Yeah, that's definitely the case. There's a feeling particularly at the beginning of the season of, like, welcome to your new home, with one of the characters being an alien who is not used to Earth life. And that kind of, to me, reads like a metatextual thing about, like, oh, now you're in the CW.
Yeah, there are even some jokes in the first episode, which is basically the CW pilot episode of Supergirl, if you want, where Kara's they walk into the new DEO headquarters, which are not new. They were there the whole time. They're like a block away from Alex's apartment. And she says, "This was here the whole time?" And Alex says, "Yeah, it's pretty much the same, but a little different." And so yeah, they knew. They played with it a little bit.
So one of the first huge big deals, at least for me, was at the very beginning of this season. They introduced Clark Kent and Superman, played by, as my wife knows him, Teen Wolf.
Yeah.
Tyler Hoechlin. Do not know how to pronounce his last name.
No.
But
No.
what did you guys think about this version of Superman?
By the way, I just really like the fact that our CW Superman is a refugee from that time that MTV tried to have scripted series. And that really worked out. But anyway, I think it's bizarre that Superman is introduced into the show because, if you were looking for a message about feminism and who has power, what better way to do that than bring in Superman on Supergirl? But also, so that's one thing. But the other just weird thing about it to me is we bring in Superman, who is like the character in the DC universe. Like you can't have any of the Suicide Squad that gets taken out. You can't dream of ever having Batman in this universe, but we'll give you Superman. To me, it's weird.
Yeah, I mean, I think that he does a fairly good job. I mean, I enjoyed watching his version of Superman, but I do remember, especially when I first watched this, being very nervous that they were introducing Superman mainly because, again, as Sam pointed out, like these characters are just so big in their own right that I was worried that he would overshadow Kara. And that he would just sort of be like, oh, well, I'm here to save the day because Kara can't actually save the day as Supergirl. I think they actually do an okay job at restraining that impulse. I was a little worried that he'd be, just kind of coming in and doing things his own way. Instead, they make it sort of like a family. Like he's in there for a couple of episodes, right at the beginning of the season, and they sort of make it more like a family dynamic between the two of them, right? Because they're cousins, and they have some similar experiences, being the last, well, they think the last people from Krypton, being on this world that they both grew up in, and but I do think that it is a little distracting to have him there. He does as a character suck a lot of the oxygen out of the room, and so it's kind of hard to see anything else when he's on the screen or when he's in a scene, because he is such a big character. Also, it doesn't help that all of the men in the DEO immediately start being like, "Oh, it's Superman!" Like there's sort of this level of like fan service that happens that obviously doesn't happen when Kara walks into a room. So, meh. It's okay. I mean, I think he has some really great scenes, and I think later on, perhaps they use him a little bit more judiciously. But definitely his introduction was a little nerve-wracking, for sure.
Okay. So for me, I actually am going to go off on a ledge and say that I think this version of Superman is probably the best live action version of Superman. I don't know. There's something about Tyler Hoechlin and the way he has this infectious smile that it really, one, it makes it apparent what Superman is, and it does a great job of tying the same hopefulness that Kara has with Superman as a character.
Yeah, I mean, he is for sure better than the Witcher slash
Henry
random
Cavill.
Mission Impossible villain. Yeah, and he's actually he really does remind me of Brandon Routh, of his turn as Superman, which wasn't terrible. It was just let me be Christopher Reeve 2.0, but
I was gonna say, like, are we saying he's better than Christopher Reeve though? Like, that's kind of a high ledge to get on.
well, the thing about it is he's the kind of Superman. He's in that tradition of Superman. He is not. Um, I mean, he's definitely better than Dean Cain, who wasn't terrible, but and who am I forgetting from recent history? Tom Welling, who was fine. This is definitely a better. Tyler is definitely a better CW Superman, but he's definitely in that Brandon Routh, Christopher Reeve, that sweet spot.
Okay. And I think one thing of why I like him so much is because he is only in 4 episodes in this season. And really 3 when you look at it. He's pretty much just there to be like, oh, great, Kara's here. I can go off and do other things now.
Yeah, I will say they do use him with restraint. I mean, like I said, a lot of my worries when I heard that they were using Superman this season were allayed by how restrained they were with him as a character. I am just not completely sure that. I don't know. Like, sometimes the dynamic seems a little off in these first couple episodes, but it definitely gets better. The later cameos with him, I think, are more exciting and more interesting.
And I think one of the things isn't he in. He's in one of the future season crossovers, correct?
Yeah, he's in Elseworlds.
Right, he's in Elseworlds.
Right. So I wonder, as I've said repeatedly, at this point in we're 2016, 2017 TV season? At this point in the Arrowverse, as I've speculated before, I wonder how much they were thinking about Crisis. And I wonder if this edition is one of those things that's meant to pay off more later. In other words, this December and January than it was initially. It did pay off. It was generally okay, if strange to me, but if it was intended to pay off later, that makes a little more sense to me. So I wonder if that's not.
Now, next up is probably For me, it was the biggest eye-rolling reveal that they would have Lena Luthor, played by Katie McGrath, in this series, because I immediately thought that they were just going to make her the villain. And instead, I think they make her one of the better characters.
I was so worried that she was going to be evil. Like that was the other thing. I think I went into this season with so many worries based on information they'd given us before the season started. Like I was worried about Superman. I was worried about Lena Luthor. And they do such a great job this season of sort of teasing you with like the possibility she's a morally complicated character. But at the same time, like she comes down again and again on the side of good. Like she helps Supergirl so much, even though she doesn't really trust Supergirl. And she's such a great female character in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and in that first episode where she shows up, we are told very specifically that Lena was adopted because evil is that's a genetic thing, right? That's inherited. So we're told very very quickly that Lena's not really a Luthor. So there's hope for her.
Well,
yeah, that's a little unfortunate.
I do want to say that it's really not so much that, it's just that all orphans are evil.
Yeah.
So, I do think making it clear she was adopted was more about defining the relationship she had with her quote-unquote mother.
That's true. But, it is interesting, though, because she comes in, she takes over Luthor Corps because Lex is in prison.
And renames it, because the Arrowverse loves renaming businesses.
Yeah, she renames it El Corps. And she gets a lot of pushback. I mean, there is a really great scene in that first episode where Clark Kent, so Superman in his Clark Kent persona with Kara goes to interview her. And he puts a lot of suspicion on her, right? Like he thinks that she had to do something to do with a space program or a space shuttle exploding or crashing. I'm not completely sure, but he has something to do with it. And I remember that scene, sort of having that back and forth and not knowing if she was evil or not at the beginning of the season. There's a lot of suspicion, I think, between that's put on her because of her family name, but she still kind of owns it, even though she renames the company Elcor. She still seems pretty okay in her role as a Luthor, even though she's trying to redefine what that means.
And the best part about this storyline is it's not the main storyline of the season.
Yes.
It could have been. It could have been in a much worse version of this show.
Yeah. Next up, let's go ahead and get the new male main character who I personally love is Chris Woods as Mon-El.
Who is the main storyline of this season, essentially.
Yeah, I would say that, yeah. So in the first episode, they find, it was sort of teased at the end of the last season where a pod falls to Earth and Kara and Jean go and find it, and you don't know who's in the pod, and that's the end of the first season. And so the season picks up literally right at that moment. We get to see sort of that last scene over again, and it is this strange person who is in the pod, and he's revealed to be Mon-El, who I think people will know from the comics. But he is from a neighboring planet to Krypton called Daxam.
Yes. Let's see, if Krypton is made up of the Hatfields, then Daxam are the McCoys, right? They're the feuding families of the galaxy far, far away.
I was going to go with sharks and jets.
Mine has less snapping and more shooting.
But mine has the racial overtones that we get from their interactions with each other. So one of the things we get right off the bat is that Kara, immediately upon learning that he's from Daxam, has this very
lock him up,
very racist, very xenophobic reaction to this, which she immediately is, she wants to lock him away. She, nobody never trust a Daxamite. She says something in Kryptonian that she can't translate into English because it's so vile about Daxamites. And so we get this very and it's interesting because we haven't gotten to see this side of Kara yet. Because in the first season, she's very much played as, this, enlightened, liberal, feminist young woman. But I think in this season and in some subsequent seasons, we get to see this sort of complexity of the privilege that Kara really has in some ways. I mean, she is an alien and she is a woman and she's sort of an outsider, but she presents as this like very beautiful white girl. And so we get to see sort of some complications of her character in these early seasons, especially in her early interactions with Mon-El.
Fortunately,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh man.
Fortunately, we have actual Wonder Woman, who descends and has Kara see things differently.
Not really Wonder Woman.
Well, it is really Wonder Woman. it's Linda Carter.
Linda Carter, who is President
Olivia Marsden, and I think that's funny because Marsden is, of course, Professor Marsden, right?
Yeah.
Who created Wonder Woman. So it's a whole thing. But anyway, we have President Marsden signing the Alien, what is it?
Amnesty Act.
And that's what allows Kara to kind of see things differently. That, if people on Earth have to be accepting of all aliens, then maybe she should be accepting of, the same thing, especially considering that she's an alien herself, which is a very simplistic way of looking at it, but it accomplishes in the first 3 episodes kind of an arc for Kara.
Well, and one of the big things this season is very much alien refugees as sort of this science fiction metaphor for it's defamiliarizing immigration issues in a lot of ways. And so we get sort of this rebooting of what aliens are in this first episode. So in the first season, most of the season functions, aliens are the bad guys most of the time. In this season, we get sort of this retooling, and part of this happens when a new area or new place in the show is introduced, the bar, the alien bar. And it's where all these aliens can sort of like be themselves in this bar setting. And it becomes a fixture on the show, but what it does is it allows us to see the good aliens, right? The ones that are coming in who are not like trying to destroy Earth or terraform it or, blow it up or whatever. These are just people who have come from other worlds fleeing, persecution or suffering, or in Mon-El's case, Krypton, when Krypton was destroyed, Daxam was also pretty much made uninhabitable, so partially Kryptonian's fault that the Daxamites. But we get this sort of, this retooling of the aliens as not just the villains of the Supergirl universe, but also as sort of immigrants in their own right. And so a lot of the discussions that go around this season are how much does racism have to play in our dialogue about immigration? How much does, capitalism have to play in our dialogue about immigration?
Right. And to just kind of keep things going, as far as just recurring guest stars that are of note, pretty much who I think one of the main villains of the season is Terry Hatcher as Mon-El's mother, Rhea.
Yep. So we get both Terry Hatcher and Dean Cain doing villain turns in this season. So that's a fun nod back, but I don't know. I really like this show and I really like this season, but it's funny how uninteresting.
It's not really because of the overarching plot though. Like the whole thing is like Mon-El comes to Earth, and after Kara gets over her sort of reaction to him, they develop this relationship, and she tries to teach him how to be a better person or how to be a superhero. But then his parents show up, which that happens in every relationship, right? Like just when you get over your prejudices and you become romantically involved with the person, their parents show up and ruin everything. So his parents show up. He thought his parents were dead. They decide that they would like to invade Earth instead of just like saying hi to their son. Because again, relatable. We've all been there. All of our parents have tried to invade at one time or another, right. I guess.
And I will say what makes the villain turn for Terry Hatcher as Mon-El's mom very good is later in the season, of course, Mon-El's dad, played by Hercules, correct?
Yeah,
Is
Kevin
that correct?
Sorbo.
Kevin Sorbo. Actually kind of says, I don't know, maybe I only wanted to go like 5 on the evil scale, and you're really shooting it at 8 or a 9. And she says, well, how about I stab you in the back? And he doesn't say anything because he's dead. So that does make her character a little bit more interesting.
But then I don't know, like, to me the thread got a little lost in the later episodes. Like, why do they want to take over the planet? They want to make a new Daxam, but it just seems very tenuous to me, like, especially because there are all these other places that they could go.
It's throwing complications in for Mon-El's character's growth, and as you said, Andy, Mon-El is a really great character, and I'm glad he sticks around. But it seems like initially that this story about his parents is really to get character building.
Right.
Yeah.
The worst reason.
I do think part of the reason why Manel's around is Chris Wood has great chemistry with Melissa Benoist.
They're actually married.
You're right, for real reason that they were married, but it was always kind of a joy to see them interact, particularly in later seasons. But
well, and you get these like great little scenes, like where he gets her drunk at the bar, and we get to see her just be adorably drunk, and like it. They do have this great chemistry, but it causes these like great little moments of character building as well.
Right. And also she gets to have kind of the relationship with Mon-El that she never got to have with Clark. Right? In the like training to be a superhero, training to use your powers for good, that kind of thing.
She gets to be a mentor, which we don't get to see a lot of female mentors.
Right. Yeah, good point. She gets to kind of be more like Kat.
Yeah, which is great because Kat's gone for most of this.
And by the way, just talking about some of the, Tessa brings up the tenuous parts of the later episodes with Mon-El's parents. It's really interesting, and it's a testament to why we talk about these shows and why we've been doing however many episodes of this there have been, is that we, are very negative about a lot of things that Berlanti et al. Have done, and seasons we don't like. But even in the midst of things we don't like, there's so much good to be had out of these shows, and that's ultimately why we're talking about them. So, when we're not as high up on the narratives, when we talk about the character development, that's the good stuff. That's the reason, we I think, at least maybe I'm just talking for me right now, but why I kept watching all of these seasons of television, care about the characters. That's, that can mask a lot of faults, or at least make up for them.
Right. And just to keep it going, the other main romantic interest of this season, I'm going to just sit back and let Tessa talk about this. But introduced also is Floriana Lima as Maggie Sawyer.
Yeah, so we get a love interest for Alex, and we get a coming out story in the second season of Supergirl. And we've talked before about how Berlanti especially makes an effort to include a lot of diversity, to have different writers and different actors and different artists come in and tell their stories on his shows. It's very important to him. I think that this season, and honestly, this is one of the reasons I love this season so much, is that at the heart of this season, there is this really beautiful love story that exists between Alex and Maggie. So Maggie is a cop because, as one of the characters says later on in the season, of course, Alex has to date someone that has a gun. But Maggie is played really well by Floriana Lima, and they meet each other, and Alex, who at this point we have had no indication that her character is gay. She is not out. She does not even seem to really have the self-awareness of her sexuality at this point. She becomes very close with Maggie, and Maggie, who is out and who is gay, and who at one point, if you didn't already know that this season was about outsiders, she at one point makes it very clear by saying, I sympathize a lot with aliens. I understand them. I grew up as a not straight person of color, in middle America. she sort of takes her under her wing. She's the one who brings Alex to the bar and who introduces the rest of the people to the bar. But she also calls Alex out, on her sexuality. She says, I didn't realize you were interested in girls. And this is something that Alex, again, she has this moment where she has a few episodes where she, has to think about it and she sort of reflects on it. And she ends up, coming out both to Maggie and to Supergirl or to Kara. And I cry every single time I watch the episode where she comes out to Kara. I mean, it's just so beautifully done. I mean, and a lot of people, I think, don't think about the fact that a lot of misogyny and a lot of homophobia is internalized by LGBTQ people, and so a lot of them don't actually end up coming out, or even really realizing things about their sexuality until later in life. And I think that this is a really great story about that, and about finally being happy when you realize that there's such a large part of your life that you didn't realize was missing, because the rest of the season is sort of about her negotiating this relationship with Maggie, and it's just really, really beautiful. And if anyone has not seen it, I highly recommend it, but definitely watch with tissue.
Okay. So other than that, I don't really think that there's too much to talk about as the season, introducing characters, talking about what we liked, but this season is very it's very isolated from the rest of the CW.
Yeah, I think the only thing that's probably worth mentioning, other than the fact that the end of the season sees Mon-El being sent away to take care of that kind of plot. The only other thing that we really didn't touch on is the green alien, white alien issue that is going to repeat itself in the next season of Supergirl, and it's probably more than just a reinforcement of the Krypton Daxam. Aliens also hate each other sometimes storylines because they try to kill each other too. But it's interesting. Again, as you say, it's very isolated from the rest of the universe, but it's another storyline that kind of plays out throughout the season. In some ways, I like it better than I do the Daxam storyline.
Like the Holocaust Mars storyline. Yeah,
and the whole issue of, befriending somebody who's passing as a green Martian but is actually a white Martian because, she wants to make peace. And that gives John Johns something to do this season too, and it has a lot of payoff in season 3.
Also, Kevin Smith directed 2 episodes, and his daughter was in one. Fun fact: Harley Quinn Smith was is in the Arrowverse.
Okay, let's go ahead and just kind of to sum up the ends. The Daxamites are kind of edged on by character we did not talk about, Lillian Luthor.
Oh yeah, Cadmus, the anti-alien group, which was of course run by Lena's mom. I mean, I don't know why it wouldn't be.
I forgot all about that.
Yeah, there's an anti-alien. I mean, it's fairly straightforward. It's an anti-alien group who's basically committing these acts of terrorism, and I think that was an interesting part of Lena's storyline was when she helped them catch her mom this season.
Oh yeah.
Like it was pretty. That was what cemented it to me, because there was all this like, oh, she's gonna turn evil, she's gonna go with her mom because no one trusts her, but she ends up sticking the landing anyway. Like she ends up still being good, and so that was really good, I thought.
Oh, also, James Olsen becomes Guardian in this season.
Oh yeah,
that's a story. That's
he needed something to do.
That's a storyline that ages better, I think, than it began. It did really feel a little forced at the beginning. Like, he didn't have anything to do this season. Let's have him become a vigilante. I think they use it better in season 3 than they do in season 2.
Yeah, season 2, again, is a lot of world building as opposed to terraforming. 2 different things. A lot of world building to make this show stand out on its own as a CW show, kind of distances itself from some of the CBS season 1 stuff, but plants itself in the Arrowverse so that in the future these characters can start to interact together. And as we talked about, I guess, in a episode ago with Alien Invasion, Supergirl is really what brings us the palette of how to talk about aliens.
Yeah. Okay. Now let's go to Legends of Tomorrow Season 2. The Legend season that has the most improvement from the previous season.
Yes, they definitely get an A for most improved, for sure.
What? All right. The big thing with Legends of Tomorrow in this season is one, they got the band back together without Hawkgirl and Hawkman,
Right.
which great. And then they introduced the Justice Society of America. Do either of you know anything about the Justice Society of America?
In my mind, and this is really bad, I know two things about the Justice Society of America. They are essentially the B team behind the Justice League of America, and in a later iteration, in the last decade, the JSA is headed up by none other than Killer Frost.
In the comics.
That's all I know.
Yeah.
Okay. One thing I remember is from the Justice League animated show. I think this was Justice League Unlimited. They do have the Justice Society of America episode, and there is that joke where the Superman stand-in says to John Stewart Green Lantern, "It's wonderful to work with your kind." Because the Justice Society is kind of old-fashioned. In this version, they're from the 40s, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they are fighting in World War II. They're fighting in World War II. That's the main
that's
thing.
Yep.
But yeah, we get this. We sort of get this. They were introduced at the end of the last season with Rex Tyler coming back to warn the Legends not to travel back to 1942. And so they, I guess, decide not to for a while. We sort of get to see a Elseworlds version of them a little bit, because they all decide, like, okay, I guess we're not going back in time. But then they end up being convinced by Rip to go ahead and go back in time to the 1940s, which causes like this terrible sequence of events to happen.
Yeah. I mean,
I'm still not completely sure on how they caused this terrible sequence of events to happen, but they did.
Well, I would just, as a fun casting thing and a possible explanation, with Patrick Adams playing Rex Tyler, you have to wonder, or at least I did, is he really a superhero, or is he just pretending to be a superhero because he pretends to be a lawyer on another show? So, But apparently he's the real deal.
The big thing I will always remember in this season, besides the villains, which are great, is the Raiders of the Lost Art episode. They travel back in time to make sure that George Lucas becomes a filmmaker.
Yeah, there's a few of those. Like, they get a little bit more like fancy with their time travel nerddom this season. I think part of it is that they were already having fun in the first season. But I think they realized, oh, like, this is the fun show. We can actually, like, let go of that tight grip that we have on the rest of the Arrowverse, like, a little bit in the show, and, like, spread our wings, do some fun stuff with time travel. We can go see George Lucas. We can go see J.R.R. Tolkien. We can go back and do, Connecticut Yankee and King Arthur's Court style episodes, and, like, nobody's gonna die. Nothing bad is gonna happen. Like we actually get to have fun in this show, and it doesn't have to be like, all thought out all of the time.
Right. As much as I want to go into the Arrow writers' room, I think in the next season that we're going to discuss and really just have a talk with them about how the legal system works. I want to go to the writers' room when they were breaking season 2 for Legends of Tomorrow, and I just want to hear how they got from, hey, you know what would be really cool? let's introduce a historian character and have his first scene be like an homage to Raiders of the Lost Ark, get into Oliver Queen's office. And then somebody's like, you know what we could do? We could do that, but we can also do a whole episode with George Lucas. Like, I want to know how they got there. I want to be part of that writer's room. I want to hear it because it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I just think that they allowed some of the writers and some of the directors really to nerd out this season, and I think that works really, really well. It works certainly better than some of the more clunky plot points of the last season, and the villains are more fun.
Right. So, who are the villains this season?
The Legion of Doom.
I mean, with a name like that, how can you go wrong?
And what? Who are in the Legion of Doom though? And that's really the big part for me.
So these are all villains from other shows. So part of the reason why this works is that we don't have to work too hard on the backstory. We already know who these characters are. So we get Damien Dark, who was the villain on a previous season of Arrow. And we get Eobard Thawne, who is, of course, the Reverse Flash. But we do not get Tom Cavanaugh's version of Eobard Thawne. We get the original version of Eobard Thawne, who played by Matt Letson, thank you. And then later on in this season, we get, so they team up first. And then later on in this season, we get Malcolm Merlyn, who is, of course, played by John Barrowman, is a delight, and was the villain on the first season of Arrow.
Yeah, so I would like to, for sake of ease, refer to the characters because basically these characters are one-off season 2 blips. They are not their characters from other seasons because of time travel, etc. Except for Thawne. Thawne is Second Chance Thawne. This is his second evil plan, which is ultimately thwarted. But we have Nazi Dark.
Yeah,
right?
so this is an earlier version of Dark, not the one from Arrow.
And he gets reset at the end of the season. This is a pocket Dark. This is a temporary Dark. It's a Doom World Dark, I believe, is what we have later in the season. And then we have how Malcolm Merlyn got his groove back, because they pluck him out of the timeline after he's doing kind of a pity party, I believe.
Yeah, he's like. He's basically, he just had his hand cut off by Oliver. His daughter does not want to have anything to do with him, so he's sort of moping in like this trashy apartment, watching TV basically. And then Dark and Eobard Thawne like grab him and are like, "Hey, you want to be part of our super secret boy band?"
Yeah, this is essentially Flashpoint, like for real. This is a season-long Flashpoint that begins where a speedster goes back to change something and ends with the timeline being broken.
Are you saying Legends did Flashpoint better than Flash?
That's what I just said. Yes.
I hadn't even thought about that,
yeah,
but that's right.
No.
Also, we do get Leonard Snart as a villain for a lot of, or a little bit of the last half.
They sort of use him as like as bait to get Mick Rory to switch sides temporarily. One of my favorite gags in the very last episode is everybody punching Mick. It's one of my favorite things. But yeah, we do get a little Snart.
I just love how much fun like Neil McDonough and John Barrowman have acting with each other. Yeah, it's just so much fun. I mean, yeah, we do have Nate Haywood / Steele. I think he's a fun addition to the team. And Maya, who is also a fun addition to the team in the form of Vixen.
Yeah, but she's like an earlier version. It's interesting because we had met Vixen. Doesn't she guest star on Arrow, the character of Vixen?
Yep.
Earlier, but it's not this version of Vixen. This is an ancestor.
Right. Her granddaughter.
Yeah, so Amaya is, she's with the JSA at the very beginning and ends up sneaking on board the Legends ship because Rex Tyler dies, and the last word that he says to her is time traveler. So she just assumes that the criminal on the Legends crew, Mick Rory, was the one to kill him.
Which, to be fair, 9 out of 10 times it would have been.
Yeah, so. Yeah. I mean, it's not necessarily. I mean, it's definitely a stereotypical guess, but it's not necessarily a wrong guess either. So she decides to smuggle herself on board of the Wave Rider and ends up becoming part of the crew.
And dies. And then undies.
Yeah, time travel, right? There's a lot of dying and
multiple versions of
coming
ourselves.
back. But, it's interesting. Her character is interesting because, I don't know, I don't like this character particularly all that much. I like the later character that this actress plays, Maisie,
Richardson.
Maisie Richardson Sellers plays a different character in a later season, and I like that character a lot more than I like Amaya. But what's interesting about her character this season though is she gives us I feel like one of the rules that becomes clear fairly early on is that when you join the Legends, you get one time travel fuck up. You get one freebie. Like, time travel's complicated. You get one time that you get to fuck it up, and as long as they can undo it, you're okay. You're still in. 2 and you're out. But for her fuck up is that she ends up asking Gideon about her own future. And she learns that at some point she goes back to, is it the 1950s? It's later than World War II. It's later than where she came from. But she goes back. She lives in her village. She lives for a long time, and she defends her village. But she ends up dying. And that's the series of events that causes her granddaughter her family to move to the United States, and her granddaughter to take up the Vixen power. Her power is that in an ancient necklace that allows her to take on different characteristics of animals. And I think that this is actually an interesting part of the storyline for her, is that now she has to live with that knowledge, right? This idea that, like, no matter what she does, she has to go back to that time. She has to die in order for her granddaughter to become a superhero in later on in the timeline. And this really messes up her life, right? Like, she has a romantic interest, she has other things that she's interested in. She obviously doesn't want her village to be destroyed, even though she knows that it has to be in order for the timeline to continue. So there is a lot of, like, facing your own fate type of language in this season, especially with her character. To me, that was the most interesting part of her dynamic on the show.
And isn't it neat that we get to see that over an entire season instead of, an episode?
Yeah, they do a lot of, there's a lot of ethical discussions here. Like, now that she knows, should she go back? Should she change things? Does she have to, like, keep everything the same way? Which is why you should never ask about, this is why you should never know, right? Like, that's the whole point. You should never ask about your future.
Yeah, and of course the ethical questions that are raised in this season are paid off in season 3. That is the subject of season 3. But I also think in relationship to Crisis and the crossovers is ethics, and we see it play out in Flashpoint for what it is, but in the crossover from this season, Legends is the 3rd episode in the crossover, and the Legends are concerned with time travel. This the recording that future Barry leaves that Stein and Jax find, that's also an element of this season. But thinking ahead to whatever Crisis has in store for us, some of the ethical questions that kind of get set and discussed and established in season 2 of Legends, I think will pay off as we start applying them to the multiverse as it begins to collapse.
Yeah. I would love it if it's kind of all their fault, actually.
It probably is.
I mean, it's a mix of Barry and the Legends just fucking up over and over and over again.
Oh, this season ends with them fucking up, right? That's sort of the punchline of this season, is that they break time.
But we get that with Oliver and Renee at different parts of the crossover. Is that when you came, you brought your troubles with you, and that's applied to issues of Kara being an alien and Barry being a meta. But yeah, you could just as easily apply it to the Legends and time travel. Before you guys started meddling with time, we didn't have to worry about these things. That's always the question. It's the Batman question, right?
Yeah.
But we had some really great standout episodes too. Like, one that really stood out to me is Abominations, which is the the 4th episode of the season.
The Civil War zombie episode.
Yeah, the Civil War zombie episode. So again, this is a good example of them just having fun, right? Like Civil War zombies. Like, don't you want to see this? But there's actually also some really great text here with Jax, because when they go back to the Civil War and they have to figure out how to defeat these zombies, so that way the Civil War goes the way that it's supposed to go, they end up in a very terrible decision making by Sarah, putting Jax and Amaya on a plantation, and they immediately, of course, get put. Jax specifically gets put. He's enslaved, basically. I mean, and his slavery only lasts a few days, before he's freed, and they continue on. But there is this sense that like time travel is also trauma, right? It reminds you that of the past, and it reminds you of trauma that's been passed down. And so there's a lot of really interesting dialogue about Jax, about race, about race in America, and Jax gets to go all Django Unchained on these plantation owners. But there's this moment where they're like, oh well, this might mess with time, and he says, I don't care. This is not something I can just allow to happen. And so, there's these really great episodes that do ask us to think about these questions in a way that I don't think the Arrowverse has been very concerned about before.
Yeah. It's also interesting because, like, in Doctor Who's really bad about that when they have a black member of the cast and they go back in time. They almost never bring it up.
Yeah, it's not really treated. All the characters get treated the way that, or at least a neoliberal version of how they would get treated today. So I do think that it's a really good episode, and it's a standout episode in that way. But there's a lot of, Jax is a very calm character most of the time, but we see him get very angry in this episode. And I think that it works well. There's a lot of good character moments that have nothing to do with the overall plot line here.
Right. Man, I'm trying to think of like if there's anything else, because just this season has a lot of great standalone episodes. The Chicago episode I thought was really fun. Which one is that? That is The Chicago Way.
Which is right after the crossover. It's the first episode back in.
Right. It's also the first one with Malcolm Merlyn.
Yes.
Yeah. That's fun.
And that's right before Raiders of the Lost Ark. That's the very next episode.
Yeah. Just the show did a lot to endear itself to me and make me just like the show instead of just hoping that every episode would be good. By the end, I was just like, okay, I'm on board with this show for the next season without any questions.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, and the other sort of character things that happen, and again, yeah, there's a lot of stand out alone episodes, but then we get to see Sarah take on more of a command of the Wave Rider because Rip is missing for a lot of this season.
And will leave at the end of the season.
Yeah, and he ends up leaving at the end of the season. So we get to see Sarah sort of step up. And honestly, that was surprising to me. I really didn't think that they were going to go in that direction as far as leadership. But now, a couple seasons down the line, I can't think of any other person to captain the Wave Rider. Like, the day that Katie Lotz leaves the Arrowverse, like, I'm kind of done. Like, she ends up taking a lot of responsibility this season, and I think it looks really good on her. And it's a really good development from where she was at the beginning of her character development.
Right. And with that, I think we're about good, guys, right?
Yep. Black Flash, Ghost Demon Flash shows up and takes Thawne away, which is a consequence of Flashpoint somehow.
Well, it's more a consequence of Reverse Flash running around through time.
Yeah, and so basically the whole MacGuffin of the season is that Eobard finds the spear. Is it the Spear of Destiny?
Yep.
Which can rewrite reality, and so he and the Legion use it to rewrite reality. To the Doom World version of reality, which is sort of a pocket universe.
It's so much fun.
Yeah, it's a fun episode because you get to see what would happen if they had all won, right?
One of the early times we play with Elseworlds or alternate universes.
Yeah, alternate universe sort of ideas. So like Thawne is like the CEO of Star Labs, and Dark is the mayor of Star City, and Merlin he has his hand, and he's a family person. Snart and Rory are just running around Central City being awesome thieves again.
Somebody decided that to put Brandon Routh, his character Ray, into the pre Pearl Jam Eddie Vedder janitor look, which is a really specific look, and I want to know who the fan is, but that's a real thing.
But
also,
yeah,
also one of my favorite lines in the entire show is just delivered by Malcolm Merlin and what happened to Sarah Lance in this episode.
Oh yeah, because they put all the legends are all still in this world. They're just in like positions where they're kind of being tortured in some ways without realizing it.
And do you remember what John Barrowman did to Sarah Lance?
Don't they work for Dark?
No, she's his. She's like his henchman.
Right, but at one point it just mentions the line that she's like unhappily married in a suburb in Chicago or Ohio.
That's interesting. Yeah, it's so interesting. Like some of the little throwaways you get here.
Well, I mean, and that's just like, wait, maybe it's Nissa Al Ghul. He does. Yeah, because
Sarah and Amaya are Dark's henchmen.
Right. Yeah, Nissa is unhappily married to a man in Ohio.
I mean, I guess if you're using the Spear of Destiny, you get to work out some petty issues that you got.
Right, exactly. Because she just took his hand away and also stopped him from being Ra's al Ghul. So he just has her unhappily married in a suburb in Ohio.
But yeah, like Jax and Stein are like in this antagonistic relationship, in Star Labs, and Rip is a prisoner, and in a paperweight. But then the person who saves them, who also doomed them. So one of the reasons why the Legion gets the spear is because Mick ends up turning on the Legends because of Snart. He thinks Snart is his original partner. He has to be loyal to him, so he turns on the Legends. He realizes once he's in Doom World that this is not actually what he wanted, and that he actually is part of the Legends, and so he takes it upon himself to bring them all back together in Doom World, so they can get out of there basically. And yeah, we get this gag where they all when they remember what happened, they all punch him basically, and he kind of deserves it too. But I think that this also serves as a turning point for Mick, where after this, like, he is definitely still the edgy character that we know and love, but he's definitely, he has solidified his place as part of this chosen family of the Legends. He's not going to go back, and become evil again after this.
And you can see him being accepted in the very last part of the episode where he has been wanting to go to Aruba the entire time, and they finally say, "Well, let's go."
Go to Aruba.
That's the end of the season. They go to Aruba, and nothing bad happens.
Yeah. Man. Oh.
After breaking time.
Right,
After breaking time.
Well, I also just figured out the name of the first episode of the next season is Arubicon.
Yeah.
And it's, the Rubicon in...
Yeah, I mean, because basically what they end up doing is they go back in time again to a place that they have already been, which is the big, as everyone knows, is the big no-no of time travel. You cannot go back to a place that you have already...
It's the time travel version of crossing the street.
Yeah. So they end up having to go back to 1916, which is where the Legion originally made the decision, used the spear to change reality. They go back to steal the spear. Sarah ends up taking it, and she has this sort of vision of Laurel, who has died, obviously, at this point in the Arrowverse. And she's briefly tempted to use it to bring Laurel back, but then decides that she can't do that and ends up wishing the spear out of existence. And of course, the Eobard Thawne is taken away by the Black Flash. The Legends put Dark and Malcolm Merlyn back in time where they're supposed to be and erase their memories, so they do not remember this.
And Snark gets taken back too.
Snark gets taken back too. But in doing this, even though it seems like everything's happy and they all set off for Aruba, they have, of course, there are still consequences for the choice that they make, even though it's a good choice in the sense that they didn't have another choice. There's still this consequence where at the end they arrive in Los Angeles, and there are like, I just remember watching this and going, oh my gosh, this next season is going to be so messed up, because there are like dinosaurs in downtown Los Angeles, and there are like different buildings and different people, but there's clearly time has been shattered, and like people are in the places that they should not be.
Should we call this event the Spearening?
The Spiriting.
As opposed to the Snapping?
Oh, yeah, I like that.
And further, does that make Sarah Lance the DC, the Arrowverse version of Tony?
Oh, yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
But
cooler.
yeah, I mean, like you said though, this is a better version of Flashpoint.
It's a better
version.
version.
Yeah.
It's a better version of Flashpoint, and it's another version of Endgame. This was a good season, guys.
Yeah. So you would say both Arrow and Legends and Supergirl this season are much better than first season, right?
Yes. Obviously, Legends is a much more dramatic improvement than Supergirl, because season 1 of Supergirl was still pretty good.
Yeah, Legends of Tomorrow is a roller coaster that is only going up.
Yeah, it gets better and better each season.
All right, guys. Do you want to plug your pluggables?
I am on Twitter at Suela Tessa, and I promise to tweet more, especially as I start watching more fall TV. I'm a little behind, but that's where I am.
And I'm at Sam_Morris9.
All right, guys. You can find me on Twitter at Hebrews Paleo. You can find the podcast anywhere podcasts are sold, the Geek 101 podcast. That's all for today. Class dismissed.